got people. We have people that step out and do what needs to be done. And because of that, we've got a popular club. People like this club. You know, I don't know how many are here today. Not many are really wanting to come to the meetings apart from being on Zoom, but we have over 400 members. That has risen quite a bit in the 15 years I've been a member of this club. This is a good club. Unfortunately, a lot of the members of our club are an aging community. Because of that, some of the leaders, which have been members forever and ever, Dave Femister, weren't you president in the 70s? 3 times in the 70s. That was 40, 50 years ago, guys. So you know where this aging community is coming from. Well, unfortunately, because of that, we have some people that are leaders in our club that are needing to step down. We've got Gary Takis, who's been doing the financials, plus a lot of other things, needing to step down from the job that he's doing, the jobs plural that he's doing. And we've got Wayne Schuler back there who is needing to give up his job. Now, some of these jobs are really minor. They're just, you know, doing a few things a year. Others are pretty big, but we need people to step up. We also have Tim Coleman, who is not one of the seniors in the club, but because of his job and traveling worldwide, he's not able to be the secretary anymore. So we also need a secretary. So what we are wanting to do, what the board is needing, is for some of you to step up and volunteer to do some of these jobs. Some of them can be done from home. You don't have to leave. You may have a Zoom meeting once in a while, but that's it. Others are more, you know, are bigger jobs, and you may want that. You may want to get more involved. Being the secretary or being the financial advisor, those are bigger jobs, but they still need to be done. Without them, things don't run well. So anyway, if there's any of you that would be interested in stepping up and doing some of these jobs, talk to me, talk to the board members. Are all the board members here today? Raise your hand if you are. Would you guys stand up and just let everybody see you for those that may not know you? Thank you, guys. So anyway, you can grab one of them. You can talk to me. You can talk to Dave Churba. Dave Snyder, who is sick, isn't here today. He's our VP. If you know who he is, you can talk to him. So think about it and see if there's something that might be of interest to you. Okay, our speaker is going to be Tim Coleman. And as soon as his talk is over, he's going to need to leave because he's got to leave town. Anyway, are there any new hams or new club members? Raise your hand. Give us your name and your call sign if you have one.
Mike Hokanson, KK7LNF. I came last time but didn't raise my hand. Good to see everybody.
Good to meet you. Welcome. You're going to find this is a group that does things. It's a group that gets things done. And there's more than enough people to help you do it the right way. There's events coming up if you want to be a part of those. There you go. And they won't just turn you loose. They'll put you with somebody. And that's the way I did it. It worked like a charm. I wasn't nearly as nervous the next time. Are there any license upgrades? Your name, your call sign, and what you got to.
Good evening. My name's Terry Dusenberry. Call sign's Kilo Bravo 7, Echo Hotel Charlie. And I upgraded to General last month. It only took me about 35 years to finally get around to doing it, but so anyway, very pleased with that. Hope to be on the air soon with that.
Super. There's some good HF nets out there. Get on those. HF is my way of doing things. I don't want to do 2 meter. I want HF. Okay, any awards or certifications that anybody has gotten? Okay, well then what I'm going to do is introduce Tim Coleman. He was first licensed as KB7JKH Tech Plus class in 1990 while he was attending the University of Wyoming. In 2002, he retested up to general and received the license that he's got now, KD7RUS. Tim's been director and president of Clark County, and he's now the secretary. He's also a co-chair of Lewis and Clark Trail on the Air. He just set up a tower and antenna in his new home, and we get to see the process that he did. Tim?
Thank you, Marilyn. I'm Tim, KD7RUS. And yes, I'm going to step down as a secretary, but I promise I will always be involved some way with the club. So I just got to figure out what that next chapter is, and you'll still see me around. Okay, then I'll chat to this gentleman right here that just got their general license. Was that it? Did you know, as a club member, you can check out any of the HF radios that we have? So if you want to try before you buy, if you want to just get on the air, I don't know, but I know we have people that have those. There you go. That's one of the benefits of being a member of the club, is that the equipment that we have can be checked out by its members. So tonight I moved to a new house. It was only 2.5 miles away from my old house, but it meant I had to take the tower and move it. I do feel sorry for the people that bought the house because they got this huge hunk of concrete in the ground, but that is not my problem. So, but I definitely want to put a tower up, what I had before. And I know for a lot of folks, for hams, it's not possible to put a tower up. But then again, you know, you can live vicariously through my project and maybe plan ahead, maybe dream, maybe have thoughts when you get a chance to put your own tower up. Al Rovner, for example, did an excellent presentation on going to some remote island to do DX, right? I don't see myself going to a remote island to do that, but that was a pretty cool presentation and I enjoyed it. And I gave me some thoughts about how I can do some other maybe expeditions just across the US and stuff like that. So anyways, hopefully this is entertaining. It's mostly a slideshow. There's not a lot of text. So let's go to the next slide, which is, I'm going to talk to you about the permitting and planning process, because you really can't do anything until you talk to your local jurisdiction. You got to figure out where that tower is going to go on your property. Tell you a little bit about the tower type I chose. And then once you get that planning done, then you actually have to start the work of constructing it. So it starts with the foundation. So I'll tell you about the foundation, and then there's the assembly of the tower, and then there's trying to get the tower up. And last, there's a little bit on lightning protection. I'll show you how that's set up. Very little to almost nothing about the antennas, because, well, frankly, we could talk hours and hours and hours about antennas, and I don't think I'm done figuring out my antennas yet. So I'll just tell you what I currently have on the tower, but I won't go into a lot of detail on that. So, by the way, that is the tower fully assembled. So I know I'm cutting right into the end of the story here, but it was successful. It is up, okay? That's what it looks like. Next slide. So permitting. So I've had an opportunity to put a tower in the city of Battleground, in the city limits of Battleground. And when I moved, I moved to the unincorporated area of Clark County. So the jurisdiction that I'm in right now is actually Clark County. It's not controlled by any city codes. It's controlled by the county codes. So had conversations back and forth with the county. And what you have to understand is that even though as much as we know about radio and we know about amateur radio and hams and all that kind of stuff, don't expect your local jurisdiction to know anything about what we do. So you have to educate them. You have to ask the right questions. You have to do your own research. And so when I moved in, I started talking to the county and finding out what's required. And depending on who I talked to, I got different answers. And one person says, oh, well, for a tower, you only need a permit for the foundation, but not for the structure itself. And then the city or the county had a program set up where you do everything by Zoom, because that's a new protocol they had from COVID, and it really worked for them. They don't have a whole bunch of people in the office, and they can just schedule a Zoom meeting with you. So we had that all set up, and then they canceled it. They canceled the meeting. I uploaded to their system all my drawings, all my calculations. I had some good stuff. And they canceled it, which just freaked me out. And then I get this nice little email that says, "Oh, I'm sorry. One of our assistants didn't realize you had an amateur radio tower. And when we went to go look right before a meeting, we realized you, Mr. Amateur Radio and Citizen Band support towers that are less than 70 feet do not need a permit." No permit. Now I wasted a month, but all right. The other side of the story is I don't need any permit whatsoever. As long as I keep the tower under 70 feet, not the antenna, the tower. So, and that's different, right? One's a support structure. One is a radiating element, right? And there is a distinction between those two. One's a structure and one is not. Now, I guess it's a little bit different if you got one of those AV-18s, which is actually a radiating tower structure. It looks like a tower, but it's really just a radiating antenna that's shaped like a tower. I don't know what you do with those. I'm just going to assume it's less than 70 feet. I don't have to have a permit for that one either. So anyways, if you're in Clark County under the current jurisdiction, and it doesn't sound like they're going to change it, as long as you keep your tower under 70 feet, you do not need a permit. Next. So next it comes down to, where am I going to put the tower? A lot of things to consider. Where is my radio room? Where is the property lines? What is acceptable to my spouse, right? We got to share this piece of property, right? It's what's mine is hers, and she doesn't want to see it. So So anyways, I looked at a variety of different things. North is up, by the way, in this orientation. And of course, the house and the property is in that red rectangle there. Go to the next one. So some things I looked at is, well, what direction is my tower going to be pointing most of the time? Not my tower, my antenna. So I plan on putting a beam antenna. I mean, what's the point of having a tower if you don't put a beam on it? So I'm going to have a directional beam antenna on it. And what direction am I going to point that? Well, I can cover the majority of the US all the time and never move the antenna as long as I'm pointing at roughly right around between 90 and 100 degrees. So I've selected 95 degrees. By the way, this azimuth map is something that any ham operator can get online. If you want to figure out wherever you are in the country, maybe you're traveling, maybe you're going, just go to that website, put in your address or put in your grid coordinate, and it'll give you an azimuth map that shows you where you are with the rest of everybody else around you from a directional standpoint. Yes? Yeah, you can. So anyways, I looked at mine and I'm, by the way, you can play between 90 degrees and 100 degrees, but 95 degrees looks pretty good. And you can see this red line up here in the blow up map. That puts me in the middle. And if you got a beam antenna with a 35-degree angle on it, that covers quite a bit of the US. And when you start getting into areas where you have a little less gain on the antenna, like Arizona and California, well, they're closer anyways, and you don't use as much power. Unfortunately, if I left that antenna parked there all the time, I do miss out on some of the VE stations. But 95 degrees is probably where I'm going to have that beam parked most of the time. So as you can see where that red arrow is, that pretty much the end of that arrow next to the house is where I chose to put my tower for a number of different reasons. Here's my radio room, which is the big red dot behind there. It's not the most ideal place. You're going to have most of your gain in front of your antenna, right, in your beam antenna. So most of my gain for the antenna is going to be at 95 degrees. I don't want to be in front because that's really bad for your radio room. I don't necessarily want to be directly behind it either. Now, I do have with a multi-element beam more gain to the front than I do the back. So it's not too bad being directly behind, but I'm a little offset. And by the way, I have tested this out at 100 watts. I have no problems with RF getting into my shaft. So I'm pretty good there. But I also chose that for a number of other reasons. And one of them is you can't see it from anywhere in the house downstairs. You can't see it from the kitchen. You can't see it from my wife's office. You can't see it from the dining room table or the living room. Now, the only time you see it is when you drive up to the house. Well, we're not front yard people. We're backyard people. So we get this gorgeous view of the back property and looking out to the trees, and we never see the tower. And I think that makes my wife happy. And so you do see it when you drive up to the house, but I'm kind of proud of that. So next slide. All right, so what tower type did I use? So what I have is a high gain 52-foot self-supporting crank up tower. It's made up of 3 telescoping sections that nest inside of each other. It tilts over so that you can bring the tower down and you can work on it. It also doesn't need any type of guide wires. That's what it means by self-supporting. Now, to make it self-supporting, you need a lot of concrete at the bottom. A lot of concrete. So I have a lot of concrete. A lot. It's more than a little. So in this case here, I put in just a little over 3 yards, 3 cubic yards of concrete. And it's roughly about 2,500 pounds, I believe. 2,500 pounds of weight per cubic yard, if I remember right. 2,000 to 2,500. And so you're looking at somewhere around 7,500 pounds of concrete. So, but keep in mind, when that thing is 52 feet tall and you have a wind load, there's quite the moment. That is quite the lever that the wind is pushing on that, trying to tip it over. So that's all calculated into the concrete, into the foundation. So I really like the idea that it has no guy wires, right? So because otherwise that's 3 more things you got to figure out how to anchor. And I figured out when it's it's up full all the way with the mast on it, it's going to be roughly 60 feet tall. So then I added an 18-foot vertical antenna to it. Yeah, because that doesn't count, right? You had a question? Yeah. So the question was, how deep is the foundation? The foundation is roughly 5.5 feet deep. And in fact, that's the next slide. So it's I think it's let's see, I went 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet. The rebar, I think I went 4 foot by 4 foot. And next slide. So the next slide actually has some of these dimensions on it. So it starts with the rebar cage. So the foundation is, by the way, the tower was designed under an older building code. And the old building code was something like, I can't remember, something like sustained 50-mile-per-hour wind or something like this. The new building code says you have to handle up to something like 102-mile-per-hour wind for 3 seconds or something like this. So it's a different type of design. It has the calculations are a little bit different. Foundation's a little bit beefier, but when I was in the city of Battleground, I had to meet those current code requirements. So I wound up having the structure re-engineered to get it through the city permitting back when I was in the city of Battleground. So I can just use that over again. So that's what I did. I used the drawings over again. What you see here is the design for the rebar cage. There is a section view there. So you see a cross section. You're looking at the dirt at the very bottom. You see the cage in the concrete. And then you see the tower structure and the anchor pins or the anchor bolts that go into the concrete. Those are the dimensions I'm working with as I start building this rebar cage that's going to go into this hole. There's a top view over to the bottom, over to the side over there. So you'll see things on the drawings that say 8 number 5 verticals. What that means is I have 8 number 5 rebar. And the way rebar goes is a number 5 is 5/8, a number 8 is 8/8, which is a 1 inch. A number 3 is 3/8, because rebar numbers always go by 1/8 of an inch. And I was pretty lucky. I was able to get all this rebar at Home Depot. Now, I used to go with Vancouver. I can't remember the name of the Vancouver rebar over there by Burger King on 99 in Hazeldale. Well, turns out they won't do private sales anymore. They did years ago when I got mine, but they won't do it unless you have a contractor's license. So that meant I had to bend my own rebar and build this cage myself. So I wanted to also make sure I allowed for 3 inches on all sides of the concrete, 3 inches of concrete on the outside of the rebar. Because the rebar in the middle doesn't do you anything. You want the rebar at the edge of the concrete. Because the rebar, keep in mind, the rebar is keeping the concrete from being in tension, or it's taking that load when it's in tension. Concrete loves to be in compression. You can pound and stand on concrete all you want. You start pulling on concrete and it's going to crack. And so you can imagine if that tower is like this and it's bending with wind and it's pulling on that foundation, it's trying to bend that concrete, right? It's trying to bend that over. And so it'll want to crack on those outside edges, just like a bridge. In fact, do this. Go get yourself a piece of nice Tillamook cheese at the store, a nice block of it, right? And literally bend it. And what happens? You see all these cracks start forming in the top. Cheese doesn't like tension either. I don't know why. But anyways, to prevent that cracking, the steel holds everything together. And so that's why that you see all this rebar at the edges and not necessarily in the middle. And Dobby blocks. I also want to point out that, and you'll see those in another picture, Dobby blocks are these little concrete blocks that you put on the sides and on the bottoms of the rebar, and that keeps the rebar away from the edge of the hole. Because you want to make sure that none of the concrete is touching on the outside, none of the rebar is on the outside of the concrete where it can actually start rusting and corroding. As long as that rebar is inside good concrete, it'll be okay. The pH level in the concrete keeps the bare steel from rusting. If you get salt impregnation, which you can do on bridges and stuff like that, and that salt, those chlorides start getting into the concrete, that's when it changes the pH level of the concrete and your rebar can start cracking. And then you start getting what we call rust jacking. That rust jacking is basically your rust starting to swell, and that'll start busting out your concrete. Mr. McLaren? Well, this is what was designed by the engineer that designed the foundation. So High Gain originally had a square foundation, and when I took it to the structural engineer, they just redid the calculations, and they went back and just gave me a square foundation. Could it have been round? It could have. I didn't ask for that. I'm okay with square. There's Steve in the back. You had a question? Okay. That could be. I won't argue with that, Steve. Next slide. So this is what the rebar cage looks like after it's all built. And that's not easy. Now, it's not because it's heavy. You go home, take a whole bunch of straws, take a whole bunch of twisty ties, and try to make yourself a cage with that. Man, it just feels all wobbly and stuff like this, right? It's very difficult to build that. So I had to come up with a way. Basically, I built a jig that I could put this in such that I could get all the vertical members vertical and staying vertical. I mean, it was just me. Now and then my wife would help, but basically it's just me putting all this together, and I only got 2 arms. So what I wound up doing is building a jig. Now, you see the vertical sections are the 5/8. Those go up and down. You see the horizontals, those are 3/8. And you will see some diagonals here and there, like up in this upper left corner is a diagonal. Those are not there because the structure required it. Those are there because I needed rigidity in the frame so that it wouldn't just lean over, because it is very wiggly without any type of bracing. It wants to go trapezoid on you. So, and then you see the Dobby blocks. That's your first view of the Dobby blocks on the bottom. Those are their Dobby blocks. I've offended concrete. I Adobe blocks. I was only going to say that 10 more times tonight, so I'm glad you said something. By the way, I am not a civil engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, and to me, concrete is something that, well, we just use for towers. Next slide. So what I did is I had to bend all the rebar. I made up a jig, basically put some bolts where you see those red arrows. I've just put some bolts in a piece of OSB plywood. I put some other bolts through there, basically to keep when you bend the rebar, you don't want it to bow out, right? You need a nice 90 degrees. And then you can see a cheater pipe. So with the cheater pipe, it's easy to bend 3/8. Had absolutely no problems. And then I basically just use a cutoff wheel to cut all my sizes so they're all the same shape. Laid them in there, bent them all, just basically made all my half hoops all at the same time. And even though they're bent, they're not all bent perfectly identical like I get it when the shop made it, which means when I put this around those vertical sections, some of them are in a little more tension, some of them I got to squeeze together. And that just is a nightmare in trying to get all those verticals to stay in where they're supposed to. So anyways, I bent all the hoops. Next slide. And then I just built the jig. And so the easiest thing for me was, instead of trying to build this thing vertically, tip the whole thing on the side. And what you see is a piece of OSB on the left, a piece of OSB on the right. Those holes you see on the right side, those are where the vertical bars are going to go through, the 5/8 ones. And then later on, you'll see another 2x4 on the top. And that basically holds the two pieces of OSB exactly vertical and just hold everything in place. That allows me, when I take one of those hoops and I got to put a little welly to it to get it to tie up to the vertical, it doesn't just move everything. So next slide. So this is, you can see where the verticals are now being put in place, and they're right at the very edge of the boards. And you can see the hoops are just slid in underneath. So I'm going to start now putting those exactly the distance I need away from each other so they're properly spaced. I'm going to start using tie wire to tie them in place. Next. So here you see all the bottom ones have all been tied together. And then the next slide, you'll see where all the top ones. So basically that is the cage. And at this point, that's when I start adding, I had some scrap pieces of number 3, just started adding those as angles. So when I tip this over on its side, it has some rigidity to it and I can move it. So next slide. And now you can see this, there's the just comparison between, there's the whole cage in the jig, and then there's the cage outside of the jig, looking pretty happy. Now, the next step will be to get this over to the hole. You can't lift on any of those hoops because it'll just come out of place. Where you have to do all the lifting is on the vertical sections. Welcome to the phone age. Yeah. I'll get you a glass of water. You can just put it in. It muffles the sound. So anyways, let's go to the next slide. So the next trip, once the cage is built, is now to dig the hole. Now, when I did the first hole over in Battleground in the city, I dug that one by hand. Didn't have a lot of money there, a little sweat equity. Vowed never to do that again. So anyways, to start out was after the tower is located, you can see some white paint and stuff like that around the area, is to build a frame right where you want that hole to be. And the frame is going to get beat up. It's going to get beat up. I used the little mini excavator I rented over there at Dollar's Corner at the rental place. It will get beat up. You're going to whack it now and then, but you need a visual guide as you dig that hole. Now, maybe if you're an experienced excavator and you've done this for a lot, I mean, there's people that are experienced sculptors. Give me a piece of clay and I better have something to trace against because I don't know what I'm doing. I never operated an excavator before. And so it's one of those things, I needed a guide. So this frame allows me to just keep on digging. I can see where to put the bucket. I can make sure I don't undercut, because undercut's going to cost me more concrete. I can put a level on it and make sure that if it's coming out a little bit, okay, I need to shave a little bit more. Anyways, that's a starting point. And so I used, go to the next slide. So I used a mini excavator. You see Rick Aragon, his pickup truck was there. So his pickup truck was there. He was helping me. So I had my truck connected to the flatbed. His truck was there. He was helping me haul the dirt to the back of the yard. Question? So the comment was, the first step would be to call before you dig, right? I already did that. So when I wound up putting in my shelter, I put in a carport on the other side. I had all my stuff located, and there is nothing on that side of the house. So I was good. Mr. Rick. I could have financed this a little bit, you know. Thank God that excavator was loud, because these guys are just yucking it up the whole time. So anyways, you got the excavator, and you can see we're starting to get the hole dug. By the way, you know, I drove on that grass a lot. The summertime is the best time to do this. I drove on that with a track, with that excavator, the concrete truck, the pickup truck going back and forth. Wait till you see the later pictures. That grass still looks good. Didn't hurt it a bit. Anyways, next picture. Now here you're just seeing is the hole's already been dug, and I've started to set the cage into the hole itself. It's not all the way in the hole. So what I wound up doing is taking the cage, putting 2 2x4s through it, actually 2 of them that I used to make the crib, the jig with, put those through it, tied them to the verticals. So the verticals are supporting all the weight. And then my lovely wife got on one side and I got on the other side, and like a big sedan, we just carried it all the way over to the hole. She complained a little bit, just a little bit. I had my ear protection on, didn't hear all of it. But anyways, we set it in the hole, and then it's a matter of, okay, once it's set in the hole, I need to now get it off of those 2x4s and set it down the rest of the way. You can't just hook a strap to it and lift it up. If you put a strap on it and you start pulling it together, it'll cause it to collapse. You got to pull straight up on that thing. Otherwise, you know, you're retying rebar and stuff. So next picture, it shows I'm just using the bucket on the tractor to lift it up so I can get those 2x4s out, and then I can set it the rest of the way in the hole. Now, something else I've done, you'll notice that there's a lot more framing around the top of the hole now. So that temporary frame I had for digging was good, so I could have a reference. It wasn't good enough to pour concrete. Oh, for one thing is you just keep on digging down with the excavator, some of the dirt around the edges starts falling in, right? And so you get this gap around it. There's no way those stakes that are right on the edge of the hole have enough rigidity to basically hold themselves in place once you got concrete flowing in there. Because concrete has a lot of force when it's the liquid state. So what you have is these 2 long vertical 2x4s, and you have concrete stakes. So those two things, they sit on that outside of that frame. Once I trued it back up, they sit on the ground, and now I can fine tune and adjust those with the concrete stakes and make sure everything is square and level. And you check it, and you check it, and you check it to make sure it is square and level, because everything is going to be based on that. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, also putting those 2x4s around the edges, it also fills in those little gaps from where the dirt sloughed in around the original framing. Okay, next slide. So there we are. And it's actually easier to see that additional frame I put on the outside, and that everything's all screwed together to keep it true. I needed a little bit more height on the top of the pad, so I added another 2x4 there. You can see the adobe blocks are holding the rebar in place, and they're actually a tight fit. I've done that previous foundation. I can tell you, when that concrete flows, it's going to take that cage and it's going to move it around. And there's so much force there that you're really going to have a hard time getting it back squared if it has too much movement. In this case here, these adobe blocks were really tight around there, and that cage did not move a bit. Not in the slightest. And now that top of that 2x4 frame represents the absolute top of where the concrete's going to be. Let's see. That's good. Next slide. Oh, and there's just another view. So I also put some 5/8 minus basically gravel in the bottom, because digging is not going to give you a perfectly level hole. I really wanted that cage to sit on something level. And so I put a little compacted gravel on the bottom, and that really made a difference there. Okay, that's ready to pour concrete. Oh, we're ready to pour concrete, but even though I have a foundation, I still need the plate that's going to mount the antenna to the foundation, right? I got these anchor bolts I need to put in. So the anchor bolts attached to a top plate. The top plate is basically that plate you see in that lower left corner. That's the adapter that goes between the J bolts and the tower. And these two right here, these two tabs up here on the upper right corner of that triangle, that's what the tower actually hinges on. So it's really important that those J bolts are in the exact position they need to be, because once the concrete's wet, you got only so much time. It's not the easiest stuff to work with. You only got so much time. You can't be messing around. You can't just hold it for 2 hours until the concrete gets firm enough. It doesn't go, you know, just to disappear. So it was important to build a jig such that I could get that plate in the exact position, because it has to be in the exact position where it needs to be in the horizontal plane. It has to have the right rotation to it, which means it has to be square with the foundation, and it has to have the right height. It can't just sit right on the plate doesn't sit right on the concrete. There's actually bolts that go on the bottom. You can just see it in this picture over here. There's a bolt, but there's a nut that goes on the bottom and a nut on the top, and you can use that to fine tune the how vertical you are with the tower. So you want to get the frame right. You get the jig set with the frame, but then you can use that to do some fine tuning once you get the tower onto the base plate. So you see the base plate in the corner. Now here, that base plate is actually underneath this piece of OSB, and I put some screws into the 2x4s. And the whole idea is one guy gets on one side, one guy gets on the other side, and you walk over to the hole that's full of concrete, and the two guys just set it down into the concrete. Next slide. So here we are. I have it already mocked up on the 2x4s, and now I'm starting to mark the frame on where this needs to be according to the drawings, so that it's not too far to the front, not too far to the back. It's right and centered and all that kind of good stuff. So what I wound up doing was actually building, well, you can call it a key, you can call it a slot and tab, such that when this is set in place, it can only go in one location. So go to the next one. So this is what I'm talking about. Now here you see the concrete's already poured, but what I did was took those 2x4s and basically put a piece of wood between the two that acts as a tab. These two blocks on both sides are down here are actually on the frame, and that actually makes the slot. And the way it's set up, also then I have a couple of blocks underneath here, and that sets the height. So the whole idea is when you got concrete there and your hair's on fire, that's not the time to start measuring and figuring out where stuff goes. Time to do that is ahead of time, because you just want to set those bolts in place and have them right where they need to be. So if you look at the next slide, I think I might even have this blown up a little bit. You can see where this block screwed to the frame locates the tab in this direction. This tab right here, the big one, locates it in this horizontal direction, and this little 2x4 that's glued or screwed to the other 2x4 that the whole frame is connected to sets the height. So basically, that frame is already set with that tab in 3 different dimensions. You just gotta wait for the concrete to show up. And so that concrete was, that photo was taken when we just did a rough screed on the concrete, set it in place, make sure there was no rocks or something underneath, you know, any of the tabs. And it was perfect. It worked. It was, in fact, very uneventful, right? No, so Rick and Rick were there the whole time I was digging the hole for safety, right? Might need a hand. Rick was nice enough to give me a hand with the ladder and drive the truck. And, you know, even though I think I'd say a lot of this stuff myself, it's good to have somebody to call 911 when you screw up, you know? So I appreciate you guys. Let's go to the next slide. And there it is. There is the frame, the base plate located in the concrete. Just waiting for the concrete to cure. Concrete does not dry. Well, it does dry. You don't want concrete to dry. You want concrete to cure, right? Because it's a chemical reaction. It's an endothermic chemical reaction. If you let concrete dry, it'll actually crack on you. It won't cure. It needs that water to hydrate for that chemical reaction. And you can start working with it within 24 hours. You can start taking the forms off over a certain period of time. And yes, you can change the formula, the curing time by adding different chemicals to concrete to make it set up faster and such like that. But this is just your average day 3,500 PSI concrete. And really, when you look at that graph on the side, rule of thumb is you wait 28 to 30 days before you put any kind of load on that concrete. So, and that's kind of about what worked out great for me is just basically set it there. Oh, and I also kept it wet for, I think, 2 weeks. So I just had some towels laying on top, you know, because it's kind of, they hold the water in, and just gave it a sprinkle now and then to keep those towels wet. And that, what you want to do is keep it hydrated so that basically the concrete doesn't crack on you, get surface crack. So, and it still looks pretty good. So anyways, that's it all said. I'm starting to take some of the forms apart. You can start seeing the antenna over there in the corner there getting lined up, ready to attach. Next slide. So before I can think about putting the tower on there, I got to figure out how I'm going to lift it. Now, this was a challenge because High Gain, from what I can find, doesn't sell a lifting rig. I don't know if High Gain even makes towers anymore. Do they? Does High Gain still make crank up towers? So I haven't seen any, but US Towers makes towers. You can get those through HRO and Direct and a variety of other places. So what I was able to find is US Tower does sell a lifting rig. That's it. They're pretty proud of that, by the way. I think they wanted, I can't remember what, $1,200 or $1,400 for that thing. But when I told them, hey, what's the appropriate lifting rig that you sell for my High Gain? They said, we don't make one for your rig. Stop your tower. Please stop calling us. Basically, they want no responsibility whatsoever for lifting up a tower that's not a US tower. But I got that for like $200. I felt like a bandit. And I was going to make that work with that tower. But the thing of it is US Tower is a different size tower from just the width and depth. It also has a completely different base plate to it. Their base plate is actually designed to have a lifting rig attached to it. The plate that I have for High Gain didn't. So that was the next challenge, was to modify the base plate for that lifting rig. So next slide. So here you can see that base plate, that's that triangle. And what I did is made an adapter to go onto the front of that. So now I have basically a connection point for the backstead of the lifting rig. So everything, the plate was 1/2 inch. The original plate, base plate from High Gain, is 1/2 inch. And so what I wound up using is 2 layers of 1/4 inch welded together to give me to get also 1/2 inch. It's basically bolted to the adapter plate is bolted to the base plate with 3 or 6 3/8 grade 8 bolts. And there's the tang on there. Now, the way this loading is on here is all that loading is pulling away from the base plate. There's almost no weight straight down, a little bit, but not significant. Most of it's all pulling. Basically, the load is going this way. So these J bolts here are in shear. These are the ones that are in the concrete. These are in shear, and this plate is pulling on the other plate that I bolted it to. So next slide. So here's a kind of the view of the forces on this. So you see at the very top, there's a pulley up there, and that's where the cable is going to attach going down to the tower. So when you're pulling with all the force pulling down, of course, the tower is heavy, right? It's pulling down on that. You have the center support legs at the center, and it's acting kind of like a center fulcrum, like for a teeter-totter. So as it pulls that direction, these legs keep this backstead in place, you get this force going in the opposite direction. And that's what I'm saying is these the bolts down there in that base plate has almost all its force going out. Most of it. Not all of it, but 95% of it. And then you have the weight. As this pulls in this direction, it's pulling in, it also wants to pull the teeter-totter this way. It has, these legs are in compression, and that's what these foot pads were designed to handle. So the foot pads are basically pushing down on the concrete with a little bit of shear. And really the easiest way to think about this, the forces on this, it really does work like a teeter-totter. So if you go to the next slide, this, I just put it on its side. I know it's kind of mental, but imagine this is the middle of the teeter-totter. You're sitting on this end, your favorite buddy is sitting on this end. If you weigh more than he does, he's going to go up in the air, right? Because this is the pivot point. And that's basically what's happening, but it's just rotated 90 degrees. Next slide. So this is making up the plate. It's important to get this tang in the right position that the backstead is going to bolt to, because it's got to be square. It can't be rotated. If it's rotated, then the pulley is not going to be pulling true on the tower. And make sure this is all vertical and set. Basically, just use the bucket on the tractor as a brace to hold this in place. And then once I had everything where it needed to be, a couple of tacks with the welder, and then I could take it back to the shop and do the finished welding on it. Next slide. So I also had to make up the foot plates. The foot plates, they don't need to be nearly as heavy as the other plate does. Like I said, all of this is, for the most part, it's going to be in compression or shear. And so this is all 1/4-inch plate. Those are 1/4-inch angles in double shear with a bolt that goes through them. And then those are 3/8 anchor bolts, 4 of them that basically tie it into the pad. So you see the beginning and then the final product as it's a little bit of paint on it. Hey, next slide. So with the lifting rig in place, now is the task of attaching the tower to the base plate itself. And that was the easiest part. So one end, I put a dolly on. The other end, I just lifted it up and put a trolley jack on. And the trolley jack, you know, has those little wheels that go in all directions. I could just pump up a little bit on the trolley jack at the right height. I could wheel it onto the OSB. It took me like 20 minutes to connect the tower to the frame using that setup. So that was very uneventful. Next slide. So the next part is lifting it. So the way the lifting rig is set up, you have basically use a pulley. Now, if you had a US tower, you would already have a pulley that's welded by US Tower to the side of your tower. This is not set up that way. So what I wound up using is what they call a soft cinch nylon shackle. Basically, it's a heavy nylon rope. I think that one's rated for something like some 10,000 pounds. It's got a loop in one end, it's got a knot in the other. You just feed the knot through, and when it pulls on it, it basically keeps it from slipping. And then there's a 30,000 pound shackle on there. And that wire rope you'll see goes all the way over the top pulley of that backstead. And then it goes through the pulley that's attached to the tower, and then it goes back to the top of the backstead again. And that's important because it cuts the load on that cable by half. You want that. That's 3/16 wire rope. It's rated for what? 750 pounds at 3/16. I know you can get some good aircraft stuff that's probably better than that, but your average stainless steel wire rope is about 750 pounds. And that loading on there, I think I calculated it at 1,800 pounds, I believe, was the force that needed to be pulled up. And it's half of that. No, it's 1,600 pounds pulling up, and half of that I got somewhere around, it was something like 800 pounds. Oh, what was that? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was well under the 750. So it's 600, it must have been 1,200 pounds if I didn't double it up. I mean, the whole thing is the whole tower weighs 400 pounds, right? And so the way I calculated that was you figure the whole tower is at 400 pounds, find the center of gravity, which is halfway in the middle of the tower at 21 feet, right? 21-foot tower at 21 feet is what? 10.5 feet, right? Take 10.5 feet times 400 pounds. That gives you a moment at the pivot point. So if I know what that moment is, and then I decide to lift anywhere along there, I just take that moment, which is basically a torque, right? And I divide it by the feet, and that tells me exactly what the pounds are. And that's a pound to pull up vertical, but I'm pulling at an angle. So when you pull at an angle, you have to divide that by the sine of the angle, and that'll tell you what your force is on the cable, because you're always going to have a Y component and an X component. I do have the math. I can send it to you. So anyways, so this is how it was set up. That backstead's about 7 feet in the air. It goes around all three of the tubes. When I lift it up, you only lift this when the thing is completely nested on into each other. Let's see. I think that's everything on that one. Let's go. Let's go to the next one. So now what you see, grounding and protection. So the drawings I have says place a ground rod at all three legs of the tower. So that's what I did. So there's two on each side. There's one in the back right behind the lifting rig. You can't see that. The one in the foreground here does multiple things. It provides a bonding point for not just the tower, but I also have a 6 gauge that goes up to the protector block. And I also have a 6 gauge that will run underground for a few feet, and then it travels along the base of the house until it gets to the grounding electrode for the house, because that's a code requirement. Code requires you have an intersystem bonding conductor that basically ties all those together. So let's see. Protector block allows, oh, that's the other thing. So what you're going to see in the next picture is this conduit right here is a conduit that goes down underground for a few feet so I can get to the house. And on top of there, you'll see the box. Let's just go to the next slide. There you go. So that box houses the protectors. Those are the lightning protectors, and they're supposed to deal with lightning. I got the good ones. They'll also deal with static. And that's mounted there, and it also provides a very good transition point for going from the cable that's on the tower to the cable that goes to the house. So I have something like, I think it was something like 112 feet from my radio room to that box. And then from the tower up, it's going to be at least, well, it's a 52-foot tower plus at least 10 feet for the mast. There's another 62 feet there. That's quite a bit of cable. The cable I want to put on that tower is going to have to be a flexible cable. So I want to use something like RG, was it 219? 219 is the flexible one? 213, sorry. So I got 213. You can use LMR 400 Flex, but as Dave recently found out, that only has a 7-year sun life. If you leave it in the sun for 7 years, you will replace it. He speaks from experience. Pardon? I went over to his house. He has LMR 400 Flex that looks like it was shedding its skin like a snake, and you can see the braid. Yeah. I haven't had any problems with, you said it was 239? 213, that's it. I don't know why I can't remember that number. So the RG213, it's nice and flexible. I mean, if you got a tower that's going to rotate at the top, right, because you got a rotor on it and you're going to be going up and down periodically, you need something that's going to flex. So what I put in here is a switch box, and I run 2 good quality LMR 400s, or they call it 400 Max that DX Engineering sells, and I got 2 of those cables that go into the house. Those are more of a rigid cable. They don't have to bend a lot, but they have a very low loss. They actually have a dB loss rating for UHF. So it's a good cable. And that allows me to spend my money on the cable, and with that switch box, I'm not going to run all 3 HF antennas at the same time. I'm either going to be on the beam, which is 3 bands, or I'm going to be on the 80 meter, or I'm going to be on the 40 meter, which is, those are 3 different groups of antennas. So I can use a switch box and then just use one antenna, because what do you have on the back of your radio? You got one HF antenna port, right? So that's what I have is just use one cable for HF and the other one I have set up for VHF. Unless you're like Mr. Aragon, you have three. So what Rick is telling me, and for the people on that can't hear, is Rick has got the best radio, and he's actually got 3 HF ports. So you should go to his house and take a look at that. I'm just gonna have a moment of jealousy here. Just give me a second. So anyways, the box is right there. It provides a good point to get the cables up, and you can see where the conduit is for the cables to go underground. It's only about 10 feet to go underground in conduit. And then there's a little fence post that actually works as a support for the protector block. Next slide. Oh, here's all the goodies. This is the inside of the protector block. So in the upper left corner, you see the antenna switch, remote antenna switch. I've had that one for years. Works great. You see in the middle, you'll see all the different HF protectors, all the different protectors for the HF band. That lower right corner, well, you need a protector for your rotor too. The code says you got to protect all your cables before they come into the house. And then you have a little protector up there for VHF, but that's where all the magic happens. And yeah, this cable right here is not these little cables here that you see with the clear coating on it, not designed to be in the sun at all. But then again, when I put the cover on, it's not in the sun at all. So it works just fine. So that's the protector block. Next slide. Tower support frame. So this is something else I had to think about. When this tower is going to be leaned over 99% of the time, it's because I got to work on an antenna. The only time it really is ever going to be flat on the ground and level is the day I put it up for the very first time and the day I take it down for the very last time. Other than that, it'll always have a beam antenna on it. And that beam antenna keeps you from putting it all the way on the ground. So you need some way to support it, and you don't want to be working on your antennas if all you have is that little 3/16 stainless steel cable holding on to it, right? That's just tempting fate. So what I did is built a little ladder structure. And you've seen Dave, you've been to Field Day, you see Dave has something very similar to that for his tower he brings out there. And that just is set to sit up there at very one point. And I've already set it up so that when the tower is down and the beam is down, there is roughly about 1.5 inches, 2 inches under the top of the middle post of the mast where it doesn't hit the ground. Next slide. So here's a close-up view. I used just a couple of things of concrete and a couple of concrete stakes screwed to a piece of 2x4 so that it's always, I can just locate it always in the same spot. Because like I said, 100% of the time I'm out there, I'm all by myself. I can't have my wife out there just holding it in place while I, crank it down. And so I can just set it out there. And I see some humorous reactions from Wendy over here. And she's going, "You mean I don't have to come out there? You can do something so I don't have to hold it?" Dave, am I reading? Yeah. So, oh, it does look that way, but no, when you're all done, these are 2 little holes down here. It comes right out, and I just pop a couple of, I think it's 3/4 inch bolts in there to plug the holes, keep the dirt out. I can mow right over the top of it. Yeah. Next slide. Oh, look how that grass came back. That grass really came back nicely, and I drove all over it. The concrete truck was there. I was surprised. I didn't do a darn thing to it. The only place where it hasn't come back was where that trench was dug. So anyways, the reason I'm showing you this one is I wanted to show you where the cable was routed. So you can see where the cable comes down the antenna, goes to the protector block, goes underground. You can see that little line that goes across the lawn, and then it goes on the house. You can't see it, can you? I was so proud of that. My wife can't see it. I can't see it. This is exactly what I wanted, was that's not necessarily to distract from the house. Now, if you saw my last house, you would have seen right in the middle of the house was a whole big bundle of cables, and I didn't want to do that again. It was right out of some third world country wiring job. So go to the next slide, and here's the line that I've traced. to show you where I've actually routed the cable. So it's actually underneath the eave. It comes up this molding right here. The conduit sits on behind the bush, and then it goes exposed to the backside of the column behind the tree, and then it follows the molding up. And then it goes underneath the eave, so it's out of the weather and out of the sunlight. I think it's going to last for a long time. Next slide. And then that's it. That's what it looks like. You'll notice that ladder is not sitting in the foreground. And the antennas I have on it, there's a 4-element beam that's K32M, I think it is, by M squared. I can't remember who the original manufacturer was. In M squared, they bought that. I'm looking at Rick Smith because Mr. Smith got one, and I said that was pretty cool, and I got one. K34. All right, so it's not a 32, it's a 34. See, I long ago, this is a short story. Long ago, I bought a Hustler. I think it was a butternut. Butternut. What was that model number? Oh, you said I got the 8. You go, well, they didn't make an 8. The one I got from him was an 8. It was missing a band. Yeah. I didn't need that band. It's a solar minimum. Who's going to use that? So anyways, the very bottom one is the big 4-element beam, great antenna. Just did a little bit of cleanup on that when I moved it from the other house. The next one above that is that goes horizontally is a big 40-meter dipole. I was amazing how big that was. I was a little surprised. And then I have on top of that is a 18-foot vertical UHF VHF vertical. So I think that is my final setup for that. That vertical isn't there for contesting. It's the wrong orientation. That doesn't mean I can't make contacts with it, but I think for the 2 or 3 VHF contests this year, I'll probably be in the field so I can whoop up on him in a different category, or I'll just set up a temporary tower. Yes, sir, you have a question? Oh, yes. Yes. So there's one other antenna I have on here that you can't see because it's a wire antenna. I have a 80-meter end-fed wire antenna, half-wave end-fed, which is a multi-band antenna, and it does work on 40. And I've done comparisons between that antenna and the dipole, and the dipole definitely has a lot more gain. Yes, the dipole, the 40-meter is directional. I mean, it's only a dipole, but it is directional. Yeah, I was very happy with it. In the past, what I had was an AV18, high gain AV18, which is a vertical tower that was 40 meters. You know, there's something nice about a vertical is that they pick up signal. They pick up noise too. And with this, I don't have to worry about ground radials, right? So I had an opportunity to put a dipole up. It's directional, and that's what I went with. So really, the only non-directional antenna I have is for HF is that 80-meter end-fed. And it does have directional, it is directional to some degree. It's just that I can't move it without a lot of work. But I'm also pleased with that end-fed, how well that worked. So that's it. I think that's the last of it. Was there any more pictures? No, that's it. There's another view from the driveway. And like I said, the only time my wife sees this is when she comes home, but we're inside house people, and I think it's a monument to ham radio. Dan. For $5, come on by. Do people do drive-bys? No, not yet. No, so this is fully nested. So it's really hard to take a picture of an antenna and get it in the shot where you can see the antenna and the tower when it's up fully. So I don't have it up right now. But you can still see that tip of that tower, that antenna there, even fully nested, that's pretty high. Any questions that I had? Tom, you had a question in the back? So Tom, you're asking, am I going to go with an electric motor for winching it up? Is that the question? I don't think so. I think I'm fine with hand cranking. For me, it's not that much to hand crank it. So I don't think I'm going to go with electric motor. I actually got this tower once before, and I got it from a guy that I think, well, I got a different tower that a guy had an electric winch on it. And his thing was he'd get it all the way to the stops. He'd give that winch an extra tug on it to make sure the cables are nice and tight. And then one day the cables broke and really messed up the tower. Bent the brackets, bent the brace. It took a lot of work to fix that tower. Question, Toby, and then I'll go to James over here. Keep your fingers out. Don't ever want to climb one. But you know, there's all kinds of different towers out there. I want a tower that I don't need to hire Dave to go climb. Right? And I want something that I can work on myself most of the time. So I telescope it down, I tilt it over, I can get on a ladder and typically do everything with just a step ladder. So the question was, what type of investment? I already had the tower. Well, this is a funny thing. I didn't want to say sold the tower, but I traded the tower away for some help taking the tower down because I had a couple of towers to move. And then when I found out the other tower I had was 75 feet tall and I didn't need a permit for a 70-foot, I then made another trade with an antenna with a radio to get the tower back. It's a convoluted story, but a very generous ham was accommodating. So let's see. I think the concrete was somewhere around. I think it was around $800 for the concrete. I think it was about $800 for 3 cubic yards of concrete. The excavator was about $250 to rent for 24 hours. The rebar, Home Depot. So I think the rebar was somewhere around maybe 100, 150. It is an investment. The coax definitely is what costs money, you know, but invest in good coax, get yourself an antenna switch and not instead of buying 4 segments of coax, just buy 1 or 2, but get the good stuff. So yeah, I would say probably all in all, I'm looking at maybe around, I don't know, $1,200, $1,500. Yeah, not including the tower. Yeah. Yeah, for just the base and the coax. I already had the protectors from the last time I took everything down. Any other questions? Yes. I think I was told I didn't need a permit sometime in June. And I was operational for Salmon Run. That was my first time to get on the air was for Salmon Run. So, and as you saw through the pictures, it went from just brown grass. Eventually the grass got greener and greener and greener as I started getting more stuff put together. But it just took a while. You know, building the rig, attached the lifting rig to the base, that took a weekend and a half, 2 weekends, you know, of cutting and welding and stuff like that. Then getting the coax all routed on the house, that took a while. And, you know, it was just weekend work. Yes, sir, in the back. No, the question was when it's cranked up, is the antennas above the trees? No. No. Yeah, there's some tall trees in the back. I get up there. Yeah, I tell you what, you know, people say don't toot your own horn unless you're, you know, Dizzy Gillespie. He would get really offended if somebody else tooted his horn, right? So let me just say that my first contest I was able to play with this to get on the air was the Salmon Run, and I smoked it with like over 600 contacts. I was pretty happy with that. So I know that antenna and that radio will get out. I'm pretty happy with the way the setup worked on it. Any other questions? The question was what radio I'm using. I'm using an ICOM 756 Pro 2. ICOM. If you can't hear a signal, you can at least hear the intermod. Dave. Definitely, Dave. I agree. You do a locate first. And that's exactly what I did when I put that carport up. Yeah. That big rock was a septic tank, wasn't it? Yeah. Aren't you glad it wasn't? It could have been worse. It could have been a grave. Any other questions? I tell you what, my lovely wife is waiting over at my mother-in-law's place, and I have to drive to Pendleton tonight. So I apologize. I'm going to grab my coat and I need to take off. But please just send me an email if you got questions or something like that. Thanks.
Great job. Wasn't that good? That was very good. Learning a lot about towers. Okay, there is one mistake on this. That is supposed to say Rick Smith has a not a positive report, I'm afraid, about Dick Martin.
Well, Dick is passed, but he was always ready with the story. Sometimes they were stories, and sometimes they ended with a punchline. He told me about these crows in the Midwest that kept getting run over by trucks, and they had the hardest time figuring it out. And then, well, they figured it out because when the cars came along, the crows said caw. When the trucks came, he didn't know what to say. He could only say caw.
Anyway, Dick Martin was a longtime member of the club, and he did pass about a week or two ago. So I know there's some of you old timers here that remember him. He was a longtime member and did a lot for the club. The surplus sales, Dave Churba.
So many of you have heard me on the radio. We're talking. We had a donation to the club from an estate. And this is like many estate donations we get. There's a lot of plus and a lot of good. And then there's some, my God, what is this? All told, if we were to get some of the basic prices for this, it would mean close to $15,000 for the club. So there's a lot of material in there. Now, I filled a 10 by 15 foot storage unit with this stuff, and I'm not done. I still have a reel of Andrews coax and a couple of 19-inch racks to put in there, and I just don't have room to put them in there yet. So we have a lot of stuff. I published a list that went to club members only. Phil sent the list out to everybody. And it's going to be club members only until October 21st. Then I'm going to take a lot of this stuff down to Rittricol and see if we can unload some of it there. We don't want a third storage unit. There was no way I could put this in the other two. So we got to get rid of this stuff. You must email me with your intent to purchase the items off the list. Telling me on the air isn't making it. You have to email me so I have a queue of when you emailed me and asked for something. Of the few items I sold tonight, I had 2 items. I had 4 people asking for them. So the first email I got is the person who got it. So that's the fairest way I can do it. I hope you all understand that. Yeah, Jason is smiling over here because he was one of the 4. And I don't think Phil had published the list for 15 minutes and he sent me an email. So we have a mix of very modern stuff and we have some antique stuff. I'll show you a picture in a moment. We want to move these items quickly because we don't want to have another storage unit. We don't. There are amazing items in here. Vacuum capacitors. If you're going to make a mag loop antenna, these things cost $700-800 new. I'm putting them for sale somewhere between 100 and 200. So I'm putting really good prices on this stuff because it isn't doing anybody any good sitting in a storage unit. So we want to turn it around. We want to get it used. I have a 4-element stepper. I've got a price of like $3,000 on it. It comes with the controller, the cable, the interface, and everything like that. That should sell pretty quickly at that price, I would hope. I have, what? Yeah, it's a 4-element with the 40 meter 30 add-on to it. Yeah. Yeah. I have 48 foot of Roan RG or 45G. It's really nice to work on. I love taking it down. I won't say I like taking the stepper down. That was not fun. I really hate steppers, by the way. They're a cool antenna, but I hate them. Next slide, if I can. Okay, so this just gives you an example. So there's an ICOM 7600. There's a Ameritron. I think it's a 1500 amp. The big kilowatt Johnson matchboxes. The thing on the bottom right there is a Collins KWS1. I think it was the very first amateur equipment that Collins made. And that box beneath it that you can see, it's supposedly a kilowatt amplifier. I said the supposedly. I think the actual DC power input to the thing is about 2.5 kW. It takes its own 220 plug to run. And the problem with that is that's one of these super collector items. According to some of the sales records I could locate, these things went from anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. So that's the kind of collector item they are. So if you know anybody who's really into that, and up in the top, your Heathkit folks, that's the DX40 sitting there. I got really good prices on all this. Take a look at the list. Let's sell it. I sold a half a dozen items this evening to people who did ask off the list. So please help us out. And with that, okay, we're on to the other.
Okay. Judith, new members.
People that join now get the rest of this year and all of next year for the price. But what I really want to push is early renewals. Renew now before the end of October, and you get 2 tickets into the drawing that we'll have at the banquet. Those that renew in November to December 15th get 1 ticket in the drawing. So it's time to renew your membership. You need to be a current member for 2024 in order to vote for the elections. And those that run have to be 2024 or beyond members.
Thank you, Judith. Tom Barton. Veterans Day open house. And Delvin, you'll be after Tom.
Thank you. Tom Burton, WB7TZD. Glad to see another WB in the neighborhood here. I've got Fort Vancouver maps. If you'd like one, set it over there. Peel one off at the end of meeting. We've got information on the back. I believe, is Bill going to talk about the radio operation for the parade? Oh, okay. You want me to mention that to get hold of Barbara for radio operations for the Veterans Day Parade? Oh, okay. It's got to sign up back there. This year the parade will be on the 11th November, which after 32 years will actually be on Veterans Day instead of the weekend before. Okay. Well, another organization I belong to, which is CMAC, they're having an open house at the Peterson reconstruction hangar on November 11th, right after the parade. And we did participate in this back in 2019 when it was at the Hudson Bay High School. And what the open house is primarily for veterans, but it is open to the public. Employers, organizations that service veterans met, and we were, of course, looking for new members. I don't think we got any new members from Matt, Rick, but that was back before the COVID days. But anyhow, if the club wants to participate in that, I guess the board will talk about that at the next board meeting. I've got paperwork to fill out. Oh, okay. Also, if the club would like to participate in the parade, besides providing the radio communications, we can do that. We've done that in the past, but I don't know with Tim's schedule and that, whether he'd be in town or. Okay. But if the club wanted to do that, we could. And one other item, I stopped into a company called Vanport Rigging to have a small job done, which they did at no charge for me. And I just happened to ask them, I said, by any chance I'm associated with the radio club? We were looking for some cables to replace the cables for the towers, and they donated three, was it three? Yeah, 70 feet long each. So they donated those, and we returned a letter of thank you along with our 501 number. So it's a tax deduction. So if there's a business that you are dealing with, they might have something that could benefit the club. This is always a open thing where the club can accept a donation for something and provide a tax return. I think that's basically it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but that's okay.
Delvin, CPAC.
So this year, I'm the chair for CPAC. It's an event that brings in a fair amount of cash for the club, especially when we have a very successful event. This year, it seems an interesting situation. We had 4 long-term committee members basically time out due to health or other reasons. And we're looking for additional people who would be willing to participate with the CPAC committee. As I say, it brings in a considerable amount of income to the club, and I find it fun and interesting. Those currently serving is me, Bruce, Wayne, Gary Takis, Toby. I'm overlooking somebody. There's at least one other person that is participating now, and we'd like to get more. So if you're interested, one of the positions we're particularly interested in is a PIO that would send out publicity information to newspapers and also perhaps write our monthly newsletter of Waves, which most of us would write information as somebody's put the thing together. That would be very helpful. And also web, and I think we have a volunteer possibly for that. Also, we're always looking for seminar talks. Tim's talk tonight seems like a highly appropriate one. I think that would be very interesting for people that live far away. We usually have 1,500 to 2,000 people at CPAC, and it's a great place to kick the tires of new things. Now, I'll shift gears. On October 21, a Saturday, the club, at least several of us in the club, are going to participate with the Jamboree on the Air event at Battleground Kiwanis Park, which is east of Walmart. We'd be interested in several other people who would be willing to participate. bring a handheld, you'd be the control operator for some scouts. And we're gonna have the event from 10 until 1. If nobody's there, we'll wrap it up earlier. We're gonna do the setup about 9 in the morning. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to talk with you. I'll be around for a little bit after the meeting, and it's a great opportunity to interact with some scouts and maybe get some interested in ham radio and practice your radio skills.
Yeah, the Jamboree on the Air is a deal for the scouts. We've been trying to find a troop for quite a while, and it looks like we found one. So that's great. Thank you, Delvin. Phil, do you want to talk about the events? You can see we have a lot going on in this club. What is getting done by people that care about the community and amateur radio?
I want to add a little bit to Russ's thing. Back, I think in the 1998 or 1999, when the companies were trying to put up cell towers, Clark County realized that they had no rules or laws or anything to govern the cell towers. And they decided to write a law for it. And somebody on the club found out about it. And they went down there and talked to them, and they says, ham radio operators also need towers. So put that in there. So anybody wants to give you trouble about cell towers, tell them to go look up, ham radio towers, tell them to go look up the law on the cell towers. When I was putting up my tower, I had a rotten neighbor. He went around the neighborhood trying to get a permit to have me stop. Well, he didn't know about the law anyway. But anyway, none of the neighbors signed it. They told him to go fly a kite. So my tower is only 60 feet tall, and he decided it was 150 feet tall. And I thought, God, it hadn't even rained. So how could it grow? So he hops over the fence and he says, aren't you afraid your tower's going to fall over? And I said, no. I said, I have it fixed so it'll fall on your house. So I've had 25 years of peace. I'm here today looking for signatures for the Veterans Day Parade and the Walk and Knock. Those of you that haven't been to the Veterans Day Parade, the parade starts at 11 o'clock, and we usually start our ham radio session at 8 o'clock. And we have a little meeting to discuss anything that there's questions about or anything like that. And then the people that are up in the staging area will go first. They get there the earliest, and they're normally the first to leave. And generally we have an operator on each block, and your job is to be very alert, watch the crowd, things happen in the crowd that shouldn't happen. Most of the stuff that you see don't need to be reported, so you don't need to bother net control. The net control station is at the Marshall House on the porch. And this year, I understand the parade will be at the same route where we go down Vancouver Way and across 5th Street, and then break up on Reserve. The parade starts at Reserve Street, and the people in the staging area, their job is to make sure that the people come out, the parade units come out 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of 1, 2, 9, 8, 7, 6. Because there's going to be 3 places where there's announcers, and they need to know that the next guy is number 2 coming. So anyway, the next thing I have back there is for the Walk and Knock. That's the first Saturday in December. And both of these things, normally, if it don't rain, God's been looking at us. So on the Walk and Knock, we have a breakfast at 6 a.m. at the food bank. And it doesn't cost anything, it's free. Then we have a little meeting, and then we go to our positions. Normally, you'll be assigned to a certain school or public building or something where the Elks will have their coordinator. And their coordinator will have the groups coming in and he'll assign them to where they're going to go to pick up food and stuff. And when he's done, he'll tell you how many people drove and how many people were participating and how many people he needs. And then you'll pass that into net control. And net control is sitting right over here, Dave. He's been in net control ever since this started. What, 40 years? Then after he's done and he has everybody assigned, you'll report to one of the drop sites where the food will come in. And you have a choice there. You can stand up against the wall and look stupid, or you can help. Every time I go there, I either direct traffic or somebody's directing traffic from the club, and also I watch the people putting stuff in the boxes. If they don't put a big can in each corner, the box is not very stable. So these people that are there are high school students, and they never had to do any work at home. So you have to tell them what to do. And there's various jobs that need to be done at the drop site, and you don't leave the drop site until the last vehicle comes in and everything's all packed up and ready to go. So from 6 o'clock in the morning until probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll be tied up. So you don't have to worry about the Army-Navy football game. That's usually the second Saturday in December. If you have any questions, I'll be back there. Hope you all sign up. Thank you. I need 10 more people for the Veterans Day Parade. We've been doing that since 1997.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, that Veterans Parade is really nice. And it's a way to support the veterans. They really appreciate having people show up. Don't forget about the weekly breakfast at Kitchen Table on 134th in the Winco parking lot. It's every Thursday at 8 a.m. There's a good turnout, and it's a way of meeting people, which is really nice. There's also the monthly lunch. It's going to be next Friday. Yeah, next Friday, October 20th at 1 p.m. It's also at Kitchen Table, but it's the Kitchen Table in Salmon Creek, 1319 134th Street in Vancouver. It will also be, it'll be written up in the weekly updates that are sent out, email sent out. Hip ham shirts in the back. If you're getting cold because it's winter, they've got sweatshirts back there, and you can order them also. And Margaret for MinnowNet. Yeah, go ahead. One 136th, 137th. Okay. Okay. There you go. He lives right near there. Thank you for pointing that out.
Hi, I'm Margaret Hardwick, AE7MB, and I'm also very active with Marilyn and Barbara and a whole bunch of other women in Minnow, which stands for Montana, Idaho, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. It's a group of women ham radio operators, and we are doing a fundraiser. We've put together a collection of recipes family favorites, and that includes pet recipes for pets and recipes for cleaning products. It's only $5. You can't get a cookbook for $5 anymore. And you can order it online from minnonet.org. And if you're interested, it's a great Christmas or holiday gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, Minnow is alive and active, and this is a fundraiser to get some money to pay for the website. So check it out. Margaret also has some cards. If you're interested in getting one of those cookbooks, you can ask her for one of the cards, and it'll have all the information on it. It is an e-cookbook, so it's a cookbook that's on the internet. Next operating events, the state QSO parties, New York, vote volunteer on the air. The Halloween one, which I participate in every year, the Zombie Shuffle. It's October 28th and 29th. The CQ Worldwide DX Contest, October 28th and 29th. Telephone Pioneers QSO Party, October 20th and 21st. The Great Pumpkin Sprint, October 14th and 15th. And tomorrow is the Solar Eclipse Party, October 14th. I get most of these either from you that want them, put up there that are telling me about a new contest, or I get them off of the websites that you've got for contesting. There's a number of them, and they're very good. They give you all kinds of stuff. Whatever you're interested in, you can bet there's a contest for. So check out some of those websites and see if there's something you would be interested in. Yeah, Steve. There you go. Thank you. Okay, coming up, and this time I'm not forgetting, as I've been forgetting the last few months, but the 50-50 with James. And you'll notice how much I enlarged it on here so I wouldn't forget it.
But at first I thought, like this place up. Anyway, oh, this is Friday the 13th.
Yes, it is.
Somebody's going to be lucky. Yeah, stick with me. Draw a ticket there for you, will you, please? Tonight we have a total of $51. It's a 50-50. And the Honorable President Emeritus, longtime cam operator, pulled a ticket with the last four numbers of 4863. 4863 for $51. 4863. Going once. All right.
Bern Peters.
Burn. Come on up, my friend.
He's on the committee of Lewis and Clark Trail on the air.
Show me the proof. There you go. Congratulations. Okay, one other quick thing while I've got the mic, they never should have given me the mic. Next week on the 15th, which is a Thursday, I Warren Group and the Aries Group are going to conduct a exercise, a joint exercise, and it's called Who has the mic? I got the mic. Next week, the 15th of October, Thursday, 19th. I quit. Okay, the 19th. We got to go home. I got to go eat. All right, the 19th, a joint exercise between the Arius and Iowa group. It's called the Great Shakeup. That's when everybody does all the drills throughout the day, but the radio group will be holding an exercise. I don't have any great details, but it'll be at 7 o'clock on Thursday night on the 14724 repeater. And you said, well, okay, well, we do this every year. Yeah, we do. We had an earthquake last week, real close to here, 4.3 up in the sound, and a tornado. Yesterday was the anniversary of the Columbus Day storm. It tore up Vancouver. A lot of people got hurt. So something is always going on. So we need to be aware and how we can communicate with one another to keep aware of what's happening around us. So I invite all of you again. Every club member is a member of the Iowa group. Join us on Thursday night at 7 o'clock when the net meets. We rotate on the repeater, the simplex. It's in the weekly update. So give us a listen and join us so we know what's going on. And we can see how communication propagation is a little freaky in Clark County sometimes. Depends if it's hot and dry or if it's wet. We had a pretty good simplex, VHF simplex net last night. That's all I have. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, James. He
This-
hasn't had dinner yet. I did it right this time and he messed up.
Yeah, I did.
Anyway, thank you all for coming. Please, if you can, help put the chairs away and drive carefully going home.